Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bear Down Ballers on the field of 68 Media Networks. Arizona went into Cameron Indoor Stadium and beat the Duke Blue Devils 78 to 73. Duke was ranked number 2 in the country, and this is the first time since 2001 that Arizona has beat a top 2 team in the country on the road. I'm joined, as always, by Jordan Pollock. Jordan, how are you doing? And what'd you think about that fantastic game last night?
I am doing great. And last night was such a thriller. We were talking about it right before we started. One of the best games I've ever seen on TV. In person's probably a different story, but it was what they said on the broadcast. It was punch to counter punch the entire night. It was a thriller in one of the best environments in all of college basketball. And it was just a fun game from start to finish. And outside of a few big runs that Duke had, that were counter punches to some of the runs that Arizona had, it was back and forth the entire night.
Yeah, Arizona had five guys scoring double figures, all five of their starters. But Jordan, the guy that stood out to me and was the MVP of this entire game was Kylan Boswell. He had 12 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. He also added 2 steals, a block. And Jordan, the best part about this, he did all of this without or while only turning the ball over one time and didn't turn the ball over for most of the entire game. What'd you think of Boswell's play?
Yeah, played out of his minds. A stat line like that is just insane. And remember that one turnover did happen when I think there was like a loose ball, or he was like trying to grab the ball and it went out of bounds. It wasn't like really an unforced, or it wasn't really a forced turnover. He played out of his mind. Yeah, he did a little bit of everything. I don't think he tried to go too much out of his wheelhouse. He just played amazing, and he played a majority of the entire game. And going forward, I think it's pretty easy to see that he's like one of the more dependable guys on this team, which is crazy being 18 years old, reclassified to get in last year's class. It's really cool to see a young guy like that just rising to the moment the way that he did.
Yeah, Kylan Boswell really he did not look like a second year player. He looked like a 4 year starter, like a 4 year All American player. He was just unbelievable, as you mentioned, and he just to me he played with a lot of confidence. That was the biggest thing. He was comfortable in the game and in the offense, and like you mentioned, he didn't force anything. He was kind of letting it flow. He was and as I mentioned, everyone he just got the whole offense involved. And another thing is, when's the last time you've seen a guy in college basketball, a point guard, an undersized point guard, some may say, he's not a 6'5" guard that getting 8 rebounds. That was just unbelievable. And like I said last week, I thought and I think Kylan Boswell is better then Tyrese Proctor. He won that battle. Proctor really struggled in this game. 3 for 9 shooting, 8 points, 5 assists, but he was really passive. And another thing that stood out to me for Kylan Boswell is how improved he is on the defensive side of the ball. I thought he brought a ton of energy. His effort level was unbelievable. And he just has an act of getting to the loose balls and finding them.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's one of the biggest differences I think this year compared to last year is and I'm and I would say that Boswell is definitely a huge reason for that, but just the aggression that they have on defense. I think 3 shot clock violations against a team that you're playing when they're at home and they're a top 5 team in the country is insane. It's insane. I know as a Wisconsin fan, I'm used to seeing shot clock violations, but at basketball at such a high level, you don't see that very often. And I know that was a super awesome and fun thing to see because it gets to a point where definitely a lot of that is just the athleticism and the aggression that they bring. and a lot of it's effort and the way they were switching the entire game. And it's amazing to be able to have a roster when you're able to do that. Because Kylan Boswell was matched up against Filipowski for a few possessions, and that was crazy. You don't really see that. I would say one of the only guys you haven't seen in the NBA doing that and like able to sit in that is Drew Holiday. And so that's a huge element that this team has going forward, that they can just press the crap out of you in the half court, and sometimes there just isn't much you can do about it. And that was something that was super fun and super awesome and encouraging to see very early in the season in a crazy environment with the top 5 team.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of Kylan Boswell acting and playing a little bit like Drew Holiday. I'm not gonna lie, when I was watching the game, when I was thinking of comparisons, Drew Holiday actually popped into my head. I think that's a perfect comparison for Boswell because he's a very good point guard and his defense looks much improved. And he's not a flashy player. He plays within himself. And Jordan, another thing that stood out to me while watching this game was just how much Arizona's offense looks improved from Boswell running the offense to Kerr Kriisa last year. And when Kriisa was running the offense, he was known to be wild. He had a lot of turnovers, and it's kind of the total opposite from Boswell. How big of a difference do you think it is going from Kerr Kriisa to Boswell taking over the reins of the offense?
Yes, definitely. I think one thing that we've seen in the Tommy Lloyd era is the style of getting up the court really quick. And we saw that even with Kirk Risa. But now we have guards that are able to do that and outrun everybody for layups. I noticed Bradley did that at least one possession. And that's just a huge change in the game when you can actually get athletic guards in the game to outrun and get easy points. And I think that's something really cool that Tommy pretty much implemented the day he got here. And so now having the athletes to be able to do that is really fun in transition. The half court setting is also a little different. We're talking about how Boswell he's a 3-level scorer, and that's what Kirk Risa wasn't. They run a lot of ball screen action from one side to the other, and they'll do a lot of they'll isolate Umar and Krivas in the middle, and they'll do handoffs, and then they'll run them off those screens. And so that's a huge element where you can have pretty much 3 out of the 5 guys that are getting the ball are able to either dribble penetrate, take a mid range, or take a 3. To where Kirk Risa was pretty much he was a 3 ball for sure, but outside of that, like he would look for a roll man. He was not super big into dribble drive penetration. So that's a huge different element that the defense just has to always be aware of dribble drive penetration or sitting back for a 3. And as we saw last night, it can be really hard to guard. And I know one thing is I thought Duke actually did a pretty fair job guarding that. But the thing where Arizona will get you in a bind is on the rolls and the big sitting down. And our guards did an amazing job throughout the night of passing the ball into the post, off post entries early in the possession, but also off dribble drives later in the possession. I know Johnson got a lot of dump down balls and had I believe it was like 3 or 4 layups just by a simple having good position and being ready to go up and finish instantly.
Yeah, you mentioned playing with multiple guards, and to me, that's one of the best things of this Arizona team is that they play with 3 guards on the floor. Sometimes, Palo Larson was in there as the
Yeah,
4 man with
mhm.
Keyshawn Johnson playing the 5 during a couple spurts during this game, but Arizona has 5 guys that can play, that are guards on this team, and they're all high level. We'll get into a couple of the younger ones in a minute, but the guy I wanted to touch on next is Pella Larson. Enough good things can't be said about Pella Larson. He finished the game with 12 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. and he made the game-winning, steal. He tipped the
Hmm.
ball to win the game and to seal it. But with about 4 minutes left in the game, when the game was within a 1 point contest, Powell Larson hit a big 3-pointer to give them a lead, and he just is he's such a veteran presence out there. And to me, he's just a pro. I think Pelle Larson is going to be in the NBA someday, and he just does so many things well. He guards the other team's top players. He's a bigger guard, but he was guarding Proctor and Roach at times, and he just, to me, he always used to miss a bunch of layups or easier shots. And last night and in the first two games, I just think Pelle Larson has shown more confidence and just has finished at a much higher rate than he has in the past.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I think dependability is probably the best word to use to describe him now compared to last year, when he was in the starting lineup. And there were easy plays that it seemed like that were just a little bit hard for him early in the season last year. And he stepped up huge. Like I think you used the word glue guy for him on the pod we did earlier in
Yep.
this week. And I that's what he is. Like 6 rebounds, 12 points from a prototypical like 2 and 3 guard is pretty absurd. And I think that's one thing I know that I had a big question on was rebounding. And the way that this team just like gang rebounds is awesome to see. Like those are just effort and IQ plays of putting yourself in the right position and going and hunting rebounds, which was awesome. Especially two of those were offensive rebounds.
Yeah, and another thing about Pelle Larson, I feel like he never makes the wrong play. He always makes the right play, either, the right pass, finding the open man, driving to the basket, or he is an above average 3-point shooter. He made two out of three last night.
Yep,
So he was excellent and just provides that veteran toughness factor,
for sure.
to this team. The next guy I wanted to touch on, Jordan, is, the guy that has a lot of hype on him coming into this year. It was kind of a return to a familiar place when they went to Cameron Indoor last night. That's Caleb Love. He had an up and down game. He shot the ball poorly, 3 for 10 from the field, 1 for 5 from deep, but he finished with 11 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, and a block. He did have 6 turnovers, but to me, Jordan, when the game was on the line, when he had to make the biggest plays, he made them. He made 4 big foul shots late in that game to seal the game, and then he waved goodbye to the Duke fans. But I thought overall it was a good game from Caleb Love. And the thing that stuck out to me the most from Caleb Love was his toughness, physicality, and his effort on defense. I thought this was the best defensive game I've ever seen from him. And if he just keeps that level up, I think he's going to have a great season because, before he would rely on scoring 18, 20, 25 points a night. But now on this team, he doesn't have to do that. This team has a lot of guys that can score the ball. He's not relying on that aspect, and he can focus on adding in other ways when, like last night, his shot wasn't falling, but he still made a big impact on this game.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think one thing that speaks to that is I think his stat line too on the defensive end, 2 steals and a block. Like that's pretty and it's funny because him and Kylan Boswell were the guys that had the most steals, and they had pretty much the same amount of blocks as all of our bigs did in the front court. And so
Yeah,
yeah, I completely agree. I think Caleb Love, I think poor efficiency is where I would put him at from last night. Like 3 of 10 is not great, but in previous years, like we would have Kurt Kriisa shooting like 1 of 8 from three, like almost on like an every other week kind of basis. And so a 3 out of 10 from a guy that's your fifth leading scorer, I don't feel like is terrible. and he's in a position where he doesn't have to play hero ball. He can play inside, and I think that's one thing is he's still adjusting to the system because when he was at North Carolina, everything ran through him. And so now in Tommy Lloyd's system, it's a very free flowing offense. You basically take what you can get from the defense. And so I think that's still an adjustment period that we're kind of actually seeing him still in. And like I said a few weeks ago in my preseason take, I still think he could be a premier scorer on this team. Like Kylan Boswell has played out of his mind so far this year, but I think just from a pure scoring element, I think Caleb Love still has a lot to write about himself on this team going forward, and I think having him play really well on the defensive end and giving effort on the defensive end is going to lead to the offensive end coming around in a sense. And so, yeah, tough. Pretty tough night for him, especially for what he's been used to of like winning big games because he pretty much had to have a good game for them to win big games over the last few seasons at North Carolina. And the free throws is even the thing that got him into double digits last night. But I think there's still a lot to write on Caleb Love going forward.
As you guys know by now, we've partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook for this college basketball season. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks and predictions throughout the college basketball season. And we are going to have special offers for you, the listeners and the viewers on the Field of 68 each and every week during the season. If you haven't signed up with BetMGM yet, use the bonus code FIELD1500 and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager on BetMGM Sportsbook. Here's what you got to do. Download the BetMGM app. Sign up using the bonus code FIELD1500. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if that bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code FIELD1500 when you sign up. And remember, BetMGM is now available under one wallet in select states. As a New Jersey resident, this is super convenient for me when I have to go cover games in New York or Philly. When crossing state borders, just log into your existing account instead of having to create new accounts in each state that you go to. And most importantly, I got to let you know, we do have some fun stuff coming up for this college basketball season. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boosts, my personal favorite, parlay odds boosts. So download the BetMGM app today.
Yeah, Jordan, what you mentioned, last year and in years past when Kirk Kreese was here and he would go, 2 for 10, 2 for 12, and he'd have a bad shooting night. Arizona would struggle a lot to win games. But to me, that's the difference with this year's team is Caleb Love doesn't have to, like I said, he doesn't have to score 20. He doesn't have to go, he doesn't have to shoot 60% from the field and make 4 3-pointers. He can do things around the edges like that and make winning plays for this team, and they can get the job done because this year they have Kylan Boswell, who's much improved. They have Pella Larson, who looks like a more confident version of himself, and they got they got multiple bigs that are very good, and I want to get into some of them. The guy that to me we mentioned kind of Pella Larson as a glue guy. I think this team has 2 glue guys, and I think the next one is Keyshawn Johnson. He was excellent. I say Kylan Boswell was the MVP this game. You could arguably say it was Keyshawn Johnson. 14 points, 8 rebounds, 2 steals, a block. He was 6 for 14 from the field, but he made some big baskets down the stretch. The biggest one came with about a minute left, I believe, when he had the and one, made the foul shot, and fired the team up and got him back on track. He was just excellent. He did miss some easy buckets in the paint and kind of some questionable decisions there, whether he should put it up or pass it back. But overall, I thought that was a great game by Keyshawn Johnson. And to me, that's exactly what you need. You need a defensive force on that side of the ball. And then on offense, he's not expected to hit a lot of shots. It's basically just when he's open. He was 1 for 4 from 3. Hopefully his shot does look good. Actually, I was surprised. I hope he can improve a little bit there. But all in all, I thought he was fantastic. And they don't win that game without Keyshawn Johnson.
I agree. I agree with you. I think going into this season, I thought he was going to be like a veteran role kind of guy, and he would just kind of be a role player and just kind of help out in the little pieces and things not really on the stat sheet. But if you would have told me even a day ago, 24 hours ago, that Keyshawn Johnson was going to be the leading scorer on this team, I don't think I would have. I don't think I would have said Arizona wins, to be honest. And so I think that's one really cool thing to see, and especially that 1-3 he hit was a huge, because it ended a huge Duke run, I believe, like midway through the second half. And yeah, I completely agree with you. He's kind of almost turning into a glue guy, to where you kind of need him a little bit everywhere. Like I was saying, like he was a big guy off dribble drives that was getting dump offs from guards to get easy putbacks. And that was huge for us last night. That was huge. Him and Ballo were playing very well in that blocker role to sit and be ready off the catch. I think that's one thing that I would say that I noticed probably a majority of our turnovers, it seemed like, that were forced, were our bigs going down with the ball and getting it stripped. And so I think that's
Mhm.
one emphasis thing they'll probably look to continue, is when they get those post feeds, is if you get it a bounce pass or higher, grab it and take it straight up. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
It's something
yeah,
else that stood out to me about Keyshawn Johnson is they kept saying on the broadcast he's, a lot of people say they could guard many positions, 1 through 5, but he actually
mhm,
can, and he actually did. He was really guarding, their big man, and then he was also guarding Jeremy Roach at times, Proctor switching on. He really is a guy that legitimately can guard 1 through 5, and he really just gives this team a lot of versatility because, like I mentioned before, it gives the ability for Tommy Lloyd to be able to put him at the 5, go small with Larson at the 4 and run basically 4 guards with Larson playing, the 4. So that, and I like those lineups a lot
me
because just
too.
like we mentioned, if you have that many guys that can handle the ball, that can shoot, that can score, it just gives the team another dimension. But Jordan, the other big man that really surprised me, he was excellent, and that's Krivas, the freshman from Lithuania. He only played 12 minutes, but 12 big and valuable minutes. He did have 3 fouls. I think that limited his minutes a little bit, but he finished the game with 6 points, 6 rebounds, an assist, a steal, and a block, 2 for 6 from the field. He really was just moving well. He played really good defense actually on Kyle Filipowski during
Mhm.
certain, stretches. So what do you think about Krivas in this game, and what do you think it means to have a guy like that as a freshman, only playing his second game, not only in college basketball but in America, already looking like a valuable piece for this team?
Yeah, it's huge. And again, it's like those little plays, those little effort plays, like four of his 6 rebounds were on the offensive end, 3 of them being in the first half. And that was huge for this team, how they dominated Duke on the boards. And so I think there was a few plays to where it kind of looked like Krivas was in an awkward position, but I think just the way Filipowski can shoot the ball, I think he puts you in those kinds of positions. And so I'd say the few shots where he looked like he was kind of out of place, I don't think fully was like him being a bad defender. A lot of those are just crazy plays where Filipowski can set a screen and then flip 4 feet away and hit a three when he's sitting in the help position off the pick and roll. And so Krivas played it out of his mind. I was so impressed. And I know one thing I was saying before we got on was, if he's playing at this level in the hardest environment in college basketball against a top 5 team, where does that leave Henry Vasar when he comes back? I'm not sure. I'm not sure, because I don't know about you. I did not see Henry Vasar play any game at all last year. to the level that Krivas played last night.
No, you're 100% right. He played limited minutes last year, but Krivas already looks much improved.
Yes.
And I thought, Jordan, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording here today, but I don't think that Visar has a role in this rotation, especially in big games like this. Obviously, when they're playing some non-conference games coming up, he's also going to be out a lot of time. But when they're playing, lesser teams, there's a role there for minutes to be
Mm-hmm.
had for everyone. But like you said, if Krivas is going to look that good and Johnson is showing he can play the five at times, there's I made a joke yesterday. Like I was thinking is Visar almost should redshirt like Dylan Anderson did because there's just no room there.
And we'll see. Maybe his injuries to the extent where that is even a strong possibility. I kind of hope not for him because injuries suck, but I completely agree with you. That's a very strong possibility. And it's funny because we've never played a high intense game on the road like this over the I can't even remember the last time Arizona did that. And so I think that's one thing that's super beneficial about this because later in the season when you get in a tournament, you're running 7, 8, maybe 9-man rotations. And so I think that's a great thing to get an idea of where you're at now and possibly looking forward. So I think that's one super beneficial thing about playing a game like this. Because an 8-man rotation, I feel like is perfect.
Yeah,
Especially for
I
this
agree.
team. I don't know where else they probably dig deep. Like Duke ran 10, which is insane. I know two of those guys barely had any minutes, but just getting 10 guys on the floor against a top 15 opponent, I think is pretty insane. But our starters played super well. I was very reluctant to see how well our starters and the three guys off the bench gave us.
Yeah, you mentioned Kyle Filipowski. He was phenomenal in this game.
Mm-hmm.
25 points, 8 rebounds, 2 steals, and a block, 10 for 20 from the field. He looks like a no doubt top 10, maybe even top 5 MPA pick next year. I mean, he could have been possibly a lottery pick this past June, but he decided to come back. But besides him, Jeremy Roach was also really good, 17 points. But there are other guards, there are other young guards, Proctor, McCain, and Caleb Foster
They
didn't really do
disappeared.
didn't do a whole lot. Proctor and McCain disappeared for long periods of this game, and when that happens, like it's just hard to win games, and that's kind of Duke and Arizona have that similarity where they both have like 5+ quality guards that they can play, but also that can hurt you when your Duke and your guards aren't hitting shots. As Proctor McCain were 2 for 9 from three, and those guards are different than Arizona's. Arizona's play a much more physical game, but that's where it hurts them. But two of Arizona's guards we haven't mentioned yet, Jordan, that I wanted to touch on before we go is KJ Lewis, Jaden Bradley. They both were excellent. Jaden Bradley, 22 minutes. He only had 4 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal, 2 for 5 from the field. But I was really impressed with Jaden Bradley in particular. I thought his ball handling was excellent. I thought he was getting to his spots on offense, and he missed a couple easy shots that I think he normally, can have. He did miss 2 foul shots late in the game. It was a tough one to see that. Luckily, Arizona
Mm-hmm.
got him back with Caleb Love in the end. But overall, what do you think about Jaden Bradley's play?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier how with him and Boswell, just when they get off either a made basket or a defensive rebound, the way they're able to push the ball with their speed. And I think that's one thing that I very clearly was able to see from Bradley. His I remember one of his buckets came in transition off of a steal. I think that was late in the second half. I think it was inside the 8-minute mark. Um, and he had a tough finish right at the rim against. I think that was Proctor he was going up against, but he played super well. I was super impressed, especially with the minutes he gave. 22 minutes is a lot of minutes in Cameron Indoor, and especially in an environment like that. So I thought he played very well. And I think one thing that I noticed, especially in the first half, was how much ball, like literal ball time that KJ Lewis had. I feel like I noticed every other possession he was like almost bringing the ball up, or he was one of the first to initiate the offense. I thought that was very interesting and something possibly to look forward to, because he wasn't really like, he only shot the ball 4 times. 3 or 4 is pretty awesome. And one of those was off that emphatic dunk to end the game, which is really fun to see. But KJ, I think both of them were kind of in the same boat. Pretty efficient. Outside of the free throws, 0 of 3 combined is not great on the road. But yeah, I thought they did great. They've helped fill the roles that they're kind of asked to bring off the bench. And going forward, it'll be interesting to see the kind of offensive, because that's also too, like literally all the new guys are still trying to figure out their way into the offense and the fluidity of it.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, both of those guys were great. They added, I keep saying the word toughness, but that's just a word that keeps coming to my mind because that's what they brought. They brought toughness off the bench. They brought and they just were excellent guarding, the top guards from Duke in this game. I was really impressed with just I mean, pretty much everyone that Arizona, all 8 guys added something and gave a positive to this game. But Jordan, this was just a huge victory. Ours, like I mentioned, the first win versus a top 2 team on the road in over 22 years. So that is just phenomenal to see. Arizona ranked 12 going into this game. The last question I want to ask you, Jordan, is where do you think this leaves Arizona? Because to me, I think they 100% have to be in the top 5 now come Monday morning because 2 top 5 teams already lost on the first week.
Yes, I would agree. I'd probably I'd probably say more so top 6, just to give a little bit of wiggle room, because there are some really good teams, I think, in that top 6. I see Purdue hopping Duke to get into number 2. I think Marquette will go up. So it'll just depend the amount of teams that we jump. I easily see us being top 6 though, especially after going to Cameron Indoor and winning. It's pretty amazing. I think one thing to look into a little bit going forward is, we know that Duke was returning all these guys and they're a good team, but I think the last time that they even lost a non-conference game at home was, I think it was 2020. And they lost 2 of those, by the way, to also really good teams, Michigan State and Illinois. But that year was one of Duke's more poor years. And so I think it's always ideal to keep context around it. It's very early in the season. This is a big game, but we'll see what Duke can be, because this can be definitely a quad 1 win for us going forward. But as we saw with North Carolina last year when they brought their entire roster back, you got to look for what a team is now and what the team is going to be at the end of the year. So I'm not saying Duke's like not going to be great, because they definitely have that ability. Filipowski is amazing, and Jeremy Roach adds a huge level of leadership. But I feel like a team like Duke is a quick injury away from being not super great, especially from what we saw with Arizona. And the ACC is a very tough conference. It's a very tough conference. And especially the way we saw Arizona get at them defensively, if other teams can figure out ways to do that, Duke could struggle this year. And I think they just seemed really one-dimensional from me offensively. A majority of all of their action pretty much had to come from pick and rolls with Filipowski or Pippen pops. And so I think that's one thing to keep in mind with Duke. Not trying to take anything away from Arizona. Amazing win. But it's really early in the season.
Thanks everybody for tuning in to today's episode. Follow us on X at Bear Down AZ Pod. Follow the Field of 68 also, and we'll be back